Good afternoon and welcome. The time is 2:30 EEST on the 21st of October, and you are signed into our webinar, Crypto Asset Service Providers in Cyprus. My name is Jonathan Greenstein, and I will be your moderator for today's session. Today we'll be discussing the recent transposition of AMLD V into Cyprus law, which brings into scope providers offering services related to crypto assets, as well as a relevant policy statement and directive issued by CySEC. Following today's speakers, we will allow for a question and answer session. Our four speakers for today's session are Dimitris Taxitaris, Chief Executive Officer of MAP S.Platis Group, Alexandros Konstantinou, Director of Compliance Services at MAP S.Platis, Herodotos Michael, Head of Financial Services Registration Department at MAP S.Platis, and Theo Moussouris, Managing Director at Electi Consulting. Dimitris is the Chief Executive Officer at MAP S.Platis, a leading consulting group in the provision of licensing, regulatory compliance, internal audit, risk management, human resource consulting, regulatory technology, executive training, innovation consulting, and other services for regulated firms in the financial services industry. His clients include regulators, banking and payments institutions, investment firms, insurance firms, and investment funds and their managers. Dimitris supervises a number of engagements relating to compliance with various regulatory frameworks, the introduction or amendment of policies and procedures, the provision of advice on governance matters, the mediation during regulatory proceedings, and the provision of practical advice on a range of regulatory frameworks. Alexandros is a director and the head of Compliance Services and Research Department at MAP S.Platis. He has extensive experience in advising international financial services organizations on regulatory and risk management matters. His work involves the provision of consultation and opinions to a large number of internationally active financial services companies on legislative matters such as MiFID, MiFID II, MiFIR, EMIR, AMLD 4 and 5, AIFMD, UCITS, market abuse, and various other topics as well. Herodotos is the head of the Financial Services Registration Department at MAP S.Platis. He leads a team that is recognized as the leader in financial registrations for EU firms. His clients include, but are not limited to, forex brokers, binary option brokers and market makers, Cyprus banks, electronic money and payments institutions, and investment funds and their managers. Theo is the managing director of Electi Consulting, a consulting boutique focusing on blockchain and AI. He is a graduate of the University of Cambridge and UCL, where he studied mathematics and focused on cryptography. He worked with numerous organizations and companies such as ECB, the US Navy, MSC Ship Management, the European Commission, and many others. He is a mentor in blockchain to London Business School, UCL CBT, and the University of Cambridge Judge Business School. Now, before we promptly begin, I would like to cover a few brief housekeeping points. Either at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on how you have it configured, you will see a button called Q&A. If you have any questions, please can you ask them there, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can at the end of today's session. Please be aware that when asking questions, could you please specify who you would ideally like to have answer your question? If you can, please do not post questions in the chat function, as this will not be as readily monitored. Now, without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome Dimitris to provide a formal welcome speech.
Hello, Jonathan. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on crypto asset service providers. It's a pleasure to have you with us. I can see that the attendance is quite extensive today and growing, and it's a pleasure to have you here and to allow us to present this new concept on which we have worked closely with CySEC to make it a reality in Cyprus. As Jonathan said already, all our experts today have extensive expertise in their areas. All three have worked hard in relation to crypto assets, and either from the compliance side or from the technical side, and possess deep know-how in their area of expertise. Allow me to say a few things before we start about the group. S.Platis group, as most of you know, is a leading financial services consulting group. I will also share my screen here in supporting the financial services sector. Our clients include regulators, banks. I hope you can see my screen, by the way. Banks, funds, fund managers, investment firms, insurance firms, payment and electronic money institutions. In Cyprus, the EU and the UK, where we have presence. We do maintain a global network of associates and professionals through which we work, and we can operate effectively as a one-stop shop for regulated firms. So we can cover all the regulatory needs throughout. That would include initial advice on the structure, preparation of the application file, management of the application file, obtaining the license, and then regulatory compliance expertise, regulatory compliance consulting on any type of regulatory framework, be it MiFID, AIFM, UCITS, AML, EMIR as FTR, banking law, or any other regulatory framework in the financial services sector. We provide regulatory technology through MAP Financial Technologies, which would include automated solutions in trade reporting, best execution monitoring, and market surveillance tools, CRS FATCA automated solutions, and so on. Information security consulting through Pod Prime, governance, executive training, and innovation consulting. Our clients include startups to LSE-listed firms, so we can support any type of firm effectively and efficiently. Some fast facts about us. To date, we've successfully completed more than 300 license applications with 100% success and track record. We maintain currently more than 1,000 clients in this area with more than 15 years of expertise, or even 20 for our team in the UK, and with more than 400 employees in all our locations. We maintain vast experience in regulatory consulting, a deep understanding of financial matters, as well as the business of our clients, multidisciplinary teams, an impeccable track record, depth of scarce expert resources, and we are able to provide multi-jurisdictional support as a result. Today, our specific topic is crypto asset service provider. As we said before, we are generally working closely with CySEC in a multidimensional manner, and we have worked with them providing comments and feedback in relation to the policy statement and then the directive before this came out. We shall provide some more details today and some insights regarding the application process, as well as the operational matters relating to this type of structures. Important areas in relation to these structures are also risk management and information security. We do maintain extensive expertise in relation to these areas, and we can provide them through our dedicated subsidiaries, MAP Risk Management Services and Pod Prime. One important aspect in relation to the new framework is that it is effectively, it provides for a registration process for crypto asset service providers, but it's in reality a quasi regulation. So these kind of structures will be monitored really closely going forward, and we expect the framework to evolve into an actual regulatory framework in the future. One last point from my side, because this is quite important and has been raised by quite a few of you already, is that relating to the banking services to this kind of structure. We must all acknowledge that that is an issue to an extent, and not an issue which is restricted to Cyprus, but actually an issue which has to do with the global approach of banking regulators. And I must admit that there is some divergence between financial regulators and banking regulators often. Hence the divergence in the approach adopted by different banks in different jurisdictions and different structures, the approach of different types of structures, i.e. investment banks versus commercial banks. However, and despite the resistance, let me say, that we've seen in Cyprus and its banking system until now to be involved in with cryptocurrencies, we still do find solutions which can support crypto assets and cryptocurrencies, not necessarily in Cyprus, but this type of banking solutions could support these providers until we have a clear approach by probably the ECB in order for the whole of Europe to the European banking system in Europe to be harmonized, let's say, and the two regulators, the ECB and ESMA, to have a common approach. So without further ado, that's it from me. I will pass this on back to Jonathan for the speakers. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dimitris. Alexandros, can we now pass over to you, please?
Thank you, Jonathan. Let me pull up my presentation. Okay. Okay, is that okay, Johnny?
Perfect, thank you.
Excellent. So hi, everyone. So with me in the next minutes, I will be providing you with an overview of the new regime in Cyprus for crypto asset service provider or crypto activities in general, highlighting the most important things of the new regime and try to put some context and color on what this is about, what are the obligations, etc. And then my colleague Herodotos will be talking about the registration. Actually, it's an authorization project which will lead to a registration. And this will complete the new framework. And our associate Theo will be also discussing some of the technologies needed. So in a nutshell, we have new rules in Cyprus with respect to crypto asset activities, which effectively now crypto assets are brought into the scope of the AML and counter-terrorist financing legislation. So anyone that deals in crypto assets in Cyprus or from Cyprus now is an obliged entity according to the AML law and needs to abide with the new AML requirements. So this requires a registration with CySEC through an authorization process. Of course, we'll be discussing in more detail later on the specificities. One important note is that the crypto assets activity are still not subject to bespoke rules. what that means that the product and the service itself is still largely unregulated. The main idea here is to regulate this only from an AML perspective, even though, as you will see later on through my presentation, CySEC tried to expand this a bit beyond the AML requirements and included some operational and business conduct conditions that crypto asset providers should abide to. So why do we have these new rules? You know, why today? Why now? So the crypto space, it's almost a decade now that it's been around and has been unregulated and unchecked by governments. Some have categorized it as and coined it as the Wild West of the financial sector. We have also observed an increasing use, and there's been numerous reports and findings of an increasing use of the crypto assets for conducting money laundering and terrorist financing. So as all things, good things come to an end sometimes, most of the time, sorry, we have now the rules which are introduced by the governments in Europe and elsewhere as well, especially the advanced and Western economies, regulating now this activity. Starting off with from an AML perspective, which is a most important risk, and soon we'll be seeing also regulations specific for the product and the service. In Europe, we have the markets, the proposal of the European Commission last year, so-called Markets in Crypto Assets Directive, which attempts to regulate out of scope crypto assets, similar to how financial products are regulated at the moment, creating a single market and a passporting and a single authorization process, and creating bespoke rules for this type of products. We also saw earlier this year in July the new AML package of the European Commission that, among others, will also strengthen the regulation of crypto assets from an AML and perspective. So how did we come today? How did the events unfold to have today this new legislation in Cyprus? So we had the AMLD 5 European Directive in May 2018, which brought into scope some of the crypto asset activities, specifically crypto wallets and exchange of crypto assets to fiat. Soon after that, the FATF recommended to all members to actually bring into scope of the AML requirements the entire crypto activity, not just crypto wallets and crypto exchanges. And then CySEC made a consultation paper which recommended to adapt the FATF recommendations and expand the scope of the crypto assets into the AML, not just the two items of the two services of the AMLD 5, but fully comply with the FATF recommendations. The AMLD 5 was due for transposition in each EU member state by January 2020, but Cyprus being always a bit late, we transposed it in February this year, eventually following the FATF recommendations and bringing to scope all type of crypto assets activities effectively. Then in June, later this year, we had the CySEC directive pursuant to the Cyprus AML law, giving some more information in regards to the capital, the process, the requirements that crypto asset providers should abide to. And last month, we had finally the last pieces that needed to be in place in order to be able to regulate this market, which is the CySEC policy statement, which provide interpretative guidance and the view of CySEC on various matters that we'll be looking in today, the registration forms, and a few amendments of the earlier CySEC directive in June. So what we expect in the future, as I mentioned before, we expect the markets in crypto asset directive in 2024, and the new AML package of the EU. So the framework currently in place is this that regulates the crypto asset service providers and generally the crypto asset activities is the AML law of Cyprus. We have the CySEC directive for crypto asset service providers, the CySEC directives for the prevention of suppression of money laundering. So if you are coming from the investment services sector, for example, you're probably familiar with the CySEC directive for AML and the Cyprus AML law. And we have the said policy statement PS1 of 2021, plus any guidance or recommendations issued by FATF is always required to be studied and followed. Okay. So, what is a crypto asset service provider? So, a crypto asset service provider is an entity basically that provides one or more of the relevant services that are in the scope that will be in the next slide to another person or on behalf of another person. The services of the crypto asset service provider, it must be relevant, obviously, to crypto assets, which we will also see what that entails. So anyone that provides services in relation to crypto assets is considered a crypto asset service provider. Now, the services that are brought into scope, so if a person provides any of these 5 services here that are listed here in relation to crypto assets, will be considered an obliged entity and fall under the relevant requirements. So if you exchange crypto assets with fiat currencies or crypto assets with other crypto assets, if you manage, transfer or hold crypto assets or cryptographic keys or exercise control over crypto assets, or basically custodian wallet providers and transfers, this again falls into the activity that is captured by the law. If you offer, say, crypto assets or participate in the initial offering of crypto assets, the ICOs, so-called ICOs, or if you are an issuer of an ICO or assisting somebody perform an ICO, then again this activity is required. And if you offer financial services in relation to crypto assets, such as the reception, transmission of orders, the execution of orders, dealing on account, portfolio management, investment advice, underwriting with or without firm commitment, and an operation of a multilateral trading system, all of this activity is again within the scope. So if you are an advisor, if you are based in Cyprus and providing investment advice, whether to buy, sell, for example, crypto assets, then you are considered CASP. Or if you are managing a person's crypto assets, you are considered a CASP. If you are exchanging crypto assets for your clients, you are considered a CASP. So as you can appreciate, the scope is wide. The intention here is to capture almost all type of crypto asset activities. Now, if you may have noticed a bit of an overlap between the specific crypto assets activities of exchange, custodian, or selling crypto assets with those of the financial services. CySEC's view is that the four types, or the first 4 types of services are then product and results, and the financial services are actually the activity that effectively is carried out. So if you are a crypto exchange, which is providing services in relation to exchanging fiat to crypto and vice versa, or cryptos to crypto, so basically you will need to apply for this activity, but you will need to specify what services that entails, and specifically whether this will be done through a multilateral trading system. So if you will have a platform where it brings third-party interest and matches those, or if you will be just doing reception, transmission, execution, or even dealing on account in order to offer those services. So all of the relevant activity needs to be chosen when somebody is interested to obtain authorization and registration under the CySEC register. So, okay, let's look at some of the important definitions here. So what is a crypto asset? So it's a digital representation of value that is not issued by a central bank or a public authority or a government in general, and does not possess a legal status of a currency or money, but is generally accepted as a means of payments or exchange, and which you can store value electronically. Now, this does not include, obviously, fiat currency. You know, fiat is a currency that we all know that is in circulation at the moment, the euro, the dollar, the British pound. It is not an electronic money according to the Electronic Money Directive, and it is not a financial instrument, okay, under MiFID, obviously. If you have a crypto asset activity that actually is a financial instruments, usually these are the investment-based tokens which you may have heard of. This is not considered a crypto asset for these purposes. It's probably going to be a financial instrument and should be regulated separately under the investment services law. Okay, so we are talking purely about crypto assets that do not fall into any of the other existing directives or legislations in Cyprus and the EU, such as the electronic money or MiFID directive. A custodian wallet provider, what we mean by that is an entity that provides services to safeguard private cryptographic keys and transfer virtual currencies. What a transfer of crypto asset means is carrying out a transaction for the account of another person, by which a crypto asset is transferred from one address to another person's or another address in general. Okay, so who should get registered? Any crypto asset service provider that provides services in or from Cyprus, we said, needs to be registered. Now, if you are an EU registered crypto asset provider, so you have, let's say, crypto asset registration in Estonia, you are exempt from the requirement to be authorized under CySEC. Okay, and as long as the activity that you offer to Cyprus is covered by your other EU authorization. Okay, if you, for example, are authorized in Estonia only for crypto exchange, meaning to exchange crypto assets or fiat cryptos, but you offer crypto portfolio management services on crypto assets in Cyprus, then your activity with respect to portfolio management needs to be authorized and regulated in Cyprus. Unless you go seek extension of your authorization, obviously in your home EU member state where you are registered. Now, third country crypto asset provider offering their services in Cyprus, meaning remotely, will need to also pass an authorization and registration process with CySEC. This is a remote registration, but I would say that the chances of succeeding this will be slim, considering that CySEC may have difficulty in supervising a third country provider. So it would be much better to seek an establishment in Cyprus and get authorized not remotely, but from here, and provide the activity from Cyprus rather than in Cyprus. So by when somebody should register, and I think somebody posed a question for this during his registration procedure. So if you are a new business, obviously you need to register before you can commence operation. If you are an exempted EU CASP, meaning that you are registered from another, you are already registered in another EU country, you just need to notify CySEC before you commence your operation in Cyprus. And if you are an existing business already established here or offering services in Cyprus, you need to submit an application to CySEC before the end of October, this month. Wow, this is fast. I mean, they only issued the forms probably a few weeks ago, so I wonder how people will manage to really submit an application before the end of October. Now, it's important to say that the law doesn't provide any grandfathering for existing businesses, but in CySEC's policy statement, they said they will provide some flexibility. I mean, they will not require you basically to stop activity until you obtain registration. Probably they will not prioritize over the supervision of your existing business. So we hope that this will be the case. So CySEC, as we said, is the relevant authority that has been assigned to regulate this market in Cyprus, and is the authority that will publish the register with all the CASPs in Cyprus. Now, there are some issues that probably already you may have already considered or ask yourselves. So do all member states, for example, regulate for AML the same activity? The answer is no. Some EU member states have decided not to follow the FATF recommendation and bring into their the scope of AML the entire crypto activities, and only stick to the AMLD 5 activity, which is only the exchange of crypto to fiat and custodian wallet providers. This is, for example, we have Italy, Greece, they followed something similar like that. But others, and I think the majority of the EU member states have brought into their scope of AML legislation the FATF recommendations, I must say. Now, another question. You are a CASP in Cyprus. Very well, you go to CySEC, you seek your authorization, your registration. All right, am I able to offer my services in all EU countries? The answer is no. Or you need to check with each country separately. Unfortunately, this is not a single market legislation. It does not provide for the possibility of passporting. Each member state has decided to implement this in their own way. Okay, there is no, as we said, this is not, there is no single directive in Europe that regulates the product and the service. It's only regulation for AML. So what do I do? I mean, CySEC decided to exempt from the need to get authorization with CySEC other EU registered CAS, but unfortunately, most of the other countries, at least that I am familiar with, have not done the same. So if you are based in Cyprus and you want to offer your services in, let's say, France, you need to check what are the conditions to do so in France. I expect that most other EU authorities will require your remote registration to their local register of CASP, and probably the requirements to register will differ across member states. The same will apply in case of you want to offer your services in third countries. I mean, if you want to outside the EU, of course. So if you want to offer your services from Cyprus to, let's say, UAE, Egypt, or any other third country, you will need to check what are the local rules to do so, and whether you need to take any local actions. Now, let's start to see some of the specific requirements that CySEC introduced. So we have the own funds. Own funds, so CASP need to maintain own funds equal to the greater of the following. So there is the initial capital. So there is a table of initial capital that we see later on, with amounts depending on the services that you provide, or 1/4 of the fixed overheads of the CASP during the previous year. But there are transitional provisions in respect to the fixed overhead. So this is only 30% for 2020, 60% for 2023, and 100% for 2024. And this is the initial capital table. So there are 3 classes, each with a different capital requirement, 50, 125, and 150. So if you are just providing investment advice in relation to crypto, your capital requirements will be, assuming your fixed overheads are not greater than 50,000, according to what we saw earlier, and I'll give an example later on, then this should be your maximum capital own fund should be 50,000. If you are, I presume, most people, given that they will be probably holding and controlling cryptos or transferring cryptos, will be class 3, which is 150,000 here. And very small difference compared to class 2. So because I think this is a bit confusing, I got confused when I read it in the first time, and I had to read it once more to fully understand. Let me give you an example of what do they mean by this. So if you are, let's say, a CASP that had the last year 1 million euros in fixed overheads. So a quarter of that means 250,000 euros, right? So the greater and your activity, your CASP activity is the class 3 activity where you are offering, exchange, custodianship of crypto. So the initial capital is 150,000. Now, 30% of the fixed overheads, which is the 30% of the 250,000, amounts to 75,000 euros. So the fixed overheads here requirements for you is 75,000 euros, but the initial capital is 150. So the greater of the two is the initial capital, which is 150. So this will be actually your required own funds as a minimum, 150,000. Now, if you had fixed overheads of 5 million euros, means a quarter of it is 1,025,000, and 30% of that is something around 350,000 or something. So this is greater, of course, than 150, and this will be your minimum own funds. Sorry, it's a bit confusing. I don't know why they did this way, but it is what it is. So let's see now some of the organizational and operational requirements of CASP. So although the primary aim is to regulate CASPs for AML, despite this, CySEC has introduced some conditions as well, business conduct conditions and organizational requirements to quasi-regulate this product and service in order to prevent, unwanted results. And I think also the capital requirements that we saw is basically a barrier of entry so that not everybody would, and easily get authorized. So some of the organizational operating requirements of CySEC is that when you provide, if you are familiar with MiFID, these are similar principles, by the way. So if you provide any information that you provide to clients must be accurate, clear, and not misleading. You need to provide appropriate information about the CASP and its services and costs and charges. The information must be in a comprehensible and understandable form, okay, for people to be able to fully understand the nature of risks and what is being on offer. You must have effective organizational requirements to prevent conflict of interest and identify and manage those if there are any. If you are unable to prevent any of the conflicts of interest, you need to disclose and to the client what are these, okay, conflicts of interest and what you are doing to reduce the risk coming from them. Other matters is that you need to have a corporate governance in place with the proper organogram and the relevant reporting lines. You need to have staff policies in relation to staff remuneration and evaluation, and the remuneration policies, of course, must be designed in such a way that they don't create any conflict or unwanted results towards the clients and the company. You probably have to have an internal audit function Okay, I don't see. I mean, there is. They say inside their CySEC says inside their policy statement when there is of significant size, but I would presume that everybody will need to have one. You need to have obviously compliance function monitoring the activity, and I'm not talking only about the AML compliance function here. I'm talking about a proper compliance function, since there are business conduct rules, risk management. Again, to monitor also your own funds, to the right risk assessment, to ensure that the risks, operational and business risks are checked. Recruitment processes, your staff need to be fit and proper and of high standards. What knowledge and experience your staff should have. Business continuity and recovery plans. You always need to have your services available to clients and make sure there are adequate procedures and in place to make sure that the service are always provided. When you are outsourcing critical and important functions, always you need to consider how this impacts your business and have procedures to evaluate and select those service providers. Record keeping, you have to have a record and records, and your records must be securely stored. Procedures to deal with client complaints and resolve these accordingly. How close links companies or entities that are affiliated with your CASP, how these are impacting your business, if they are preventing you to do so. Websites, you need to have your own website. My colleague Herodotos will mention the requirements for the website of CySEC. And in case people undertake multiple functions, that this is not done to the detriment and are able to perform their activities accordingly. All these, of course, are much more elaborated in the CySEC policy statement, which you can download from CySEC website and read if you want to. Now, important, the security and safeguarding of crypto assets is one very important matter. You need to have deploy appropriate system and controls to minimize the risk of theft or loss of crypto assets in case, of course, you hold on behalf of your clients crypto assets or cryptographic keys. You need to carry out a comprehensive risk assessment. I mean, in terms of the potential risk of security breaches, data breaches, how your clients' assets are being held, and establish accordingly relevant procedures and policies. You need to make sure you select the right systems that will help you fulfill these requirements to have proper security and maybe evaluate the system and the effectiveness. CySEC recommends for the CASP to obtain an ISO certification, the 27000 family. I presume they mean the ISO 27001, which is the international standard for information security. Is not a must, it's a recommendation, but probably you have to commit at some point to obtain this. You need to make sure that you minimize the risk of data corruption. The immutability of your data is important, and make sure that you prevent unauthorized access and information leakage to ensure confidentiality of the data. This is also a requirement, obviously, of the GDPR. Some best practices recommended by CySEC for the safeguarding of crypto assets. You need to restrict the amount held in hot wallets, ensure that there is no concentration risk. Apply different levels of transaction approvals. So you, instead of one person doing the transactions, you may have 2 or 3 layers, 2 or 3 different people that will do it and act Chinese wall between them. You need to carry out the due diligence on which hot wallets you use. Providers of hot wallets you use to store your clients' cryptos. You need to do, in case you decide to use cold wallets, you need to do a proper risk assessment and carry out, of course, reconciliations, preferably on a daily basis, of your internal records, how much cryptos you owe to clients with what you hold in your cold and cold wallets, of course. Now let's look at the AML requirements of CASPs, which is the primary activity that will be regulated. So CASPs become, we said, an obliged entity and need to fully abide by the AML law and the CySEC AML directive. Okay, as it is, nothing changes. Like any other financial institution or obliged entity, need to apply it. The same with CASP. So this includes, among others, of course, the know your clients and carrying out due diligence and drawing the economic profile of the client in order to, you know, to see whether it makes sense and be able to use later on this to detect suspicious behavior, identify the source of funds of clients and the origin of funds, of course, monitor the client's activity and transactions to identify suspicious, obviously, reports and activity, and report this to MOCAS. So if you probably need to register also with GoAML to be able to report anything to MOCAS, which is the authority that basically deals with AML issues in Cyprus. You need to undertake a comprehensive AML risk assessment. So you need to understand where your risk lies from clients, your activities, depending on what services you offer, where your clients come from, what type of cryptos you will be engaged with. So you need to do this comprehensive risk assessment, identify the risk, categorize each risk, and then put measures and procedures in place and systems to mitigate this risk and internal controls to make sure that those measures that you have put in place obviously are followed, right? And then you have your compliance, AML compliance, that will be obviously monitoring and making sure that this policy and procedure and risk assessment are always up to date and adjust accordingly depending on any changes. Now, CySEC, one of the prerequisites is that you will use, in addition to everything else, screening software, screening data like WorldCheck or something similar. In addition to this, you have to have a tracing, the crypto asset track on blockchain. So you need to have a tool that you are able to trace an address on the blockchain to understand its history. These are, for example, chain analysis tool. Our associate Theo Mourouzis will later on discuss in more detail, obviously, what can these tools do and what are the limitations. Obviously, the requirement to do KYC of your clients is required when establishing a business relationship. So if you are a crypto exchange opening an account for a client, that means, guys, you establish a business relationship because there is an element of continuation. But if you do once-off or occasional transactions for your clients, you need to do the KYC of your clients when the amounts exceed 1,000 euros. Okay, and we said you need to appoint an MLCO and an alternate MLCO as per the obviously the requirements of the AML law and the CySEC directive. Now, some crypto specific AML considerations. Obviously, since we deal with cryptos, if you know, as you know, we are designed primarily with anonymity in mind, and avoiding, being checked. Even though the blockchain is public information and everybody can see, but people have realized that you are able to connect an address with a person, so they devise new tools to favor anonymity, like anonymous wallets, privacy coins, also known as anonymity enhanced token. If you heard about Dash or Monero, these are ones, so they are obscuring the sender and receiver. Mixing tools, so there are services out there that pull into a single address many transactions and then distributed to the envisaged address so as to obscure and obfuscate the flow of the transactions in order to, hide the track. Obviously, our associate Theo will be discussing much more on these things later on. If you are if you carry out, if your clients or you are involved in peer-to-peer transactions or with decentralized exchanges, whereby each person transact with a single person rather than in a centralized manner, obviously this creates higher risk. So these are things, the anonymity that cryptos bring and need to be considered, and the different means to favor anonymity and obscure and obfuscate the flow and of the crypto assets is important to be considered. And generally, CySEC expects that CASP will not be dealing with either privacy coins or with wallets of clients that have been subject to mixing or crypto assets that have been subject to mixing or with decentralized exchanges and so forth. But if you do so, okay, and you decided as a CASP to refrain from providing services to a person's crypto assets that have been subject to mixing, and you decide, okay, the risk is low for whatever reason, in your monthly prevention statement that you will have to submit to CySEC every month, you will need to declare which crypto asset, how much crypto assets were subject to mixing that were obviously deposited to you. And if you deal with offering services in relation to anonymity tokens, what amounts are involved, and how much this is under percentage of your total transactions in general. But in general, you should be avoiding dealing with this kind of situation. Of course, I mean, if your client makes a deposit of a crypto asset, but you realize that these specific crypto assets were subject to mixing 50 transactions, 60 transactions before, it's different than probably maybe your client had nothing to do with it. Probably, I'm not saying it's not unlikely, but probably. But if it was a few transactions before, obviously your clients will most likely have been, there will be suspicions why your clients did this, and probably this will raise red flags and avoid dealing with such activity. Now, finally, let's see the last piece of my presentation is the travel rule, which is basically a recommendation of a FATF in the risk-based approach guidance for virtual assets and virtual asset providers. So this basically is a terminology that was coined by the UK Banking Secrecy Act, which it mimics this terminology, which essentially what it says is that whenever there is a transaction in the banking sector, like a wire transfer, there needs to be relevant information exchange between the sender and the receiver of those funds. Now, the travel rule that CySEC introduced is applicable for material transactions equal to or over 1,000 euros. So you don't need to apply the travel rules for if you are transferring crypto assets be less than that amount. Now, the specific rule here is when an obliged entity or a CASP. Now, the question here that raises is, can an obliged entity transfer crypto assets if it's not a CASP? Okay, this is a question mark, but I think not. But let's say there is a scenario where an obliged entity other than a CASP sends or receives from a CASP, sends to a CASP or receives from a CASP a material crypto over 1,000 worth of 1,000 euros. So the following information must be exchanged between them: the payee's name and surname, the payee's crypto asset account number, the payer's name and surname, the payer's crypto asset account number. Where there is no crypto asset account number available, a unique transactional identifier, and one of the following 4 things: the payer's physical address, national ID, customer's identification number or date and place of birth. So now, how do you exchange this information between CASPs? This is a question to be answered, actually. In the banking, we have the SWIFT. The SWIFT messaging system is almost all banks in the world use it. So whenever you send a wire transfer, all the relevant information is sent. Now, I know you can send information through the blockchain, but obviously, if your blockchain is, which majority of blockchains are public, so you don't want to send this private information in the public blockchain so everybody sees it. So what do you do? Obviously, probably, CASP will have to adapt a messaging system, and everybody have to adopt the same system, or maybe use a private blockchain. I don't know. Really, it's a challenge how the CASP will apply the travel rule. Also, question is, do I need to apply the travel if I'm dealing with another EU CASP, given that the definition of a CASP only include an obliged entity, only include the Cyprus-based entity? Now, technically and semantically, no, because the obliged entities definition and CASP definition as per the directive only includes Cyprus entities, but I don't think that CySEC intention was not to apply the travel rule when dealing with other CASPs or obliged entities. Another thing is that in case you receive funds from a non-obliged entity, so you will not be receiving this material information, then obviously you have to collect this information from the payee. And if you are receiving, of course, those funds from those crypto assets from another CASP, together with the information about the payer and the payee, you need to check your internal records whether they match what has been sent over. In case of any discrepancies, as this probably will raise some suspicion. Okay, this is the end of my presentation, providing an overview of the most important things in the crypto asset new legislation in Cyprus. One last slide I have here: why one will want to register a CASP in Cyprus? What are the advantages? So Cyprus has skilled and knowledgeable workforce, and especially in the online provision of financial services, I think Cyprus is probably one of the more experienced workforce in Europe, given the CFD and forex industry. You have an active crypto and IT tech community which is growing. We have business-friendly authorities and an experienced regulator. There are competitive operating costs in Cyprus compared to other jurisdictions in Europe. Professional services, appropriate infrastructure to do your business. And last week, the Cyprus government announced a new incentive scheme for tech investment. So if you decide to relocate to your personnel to Cyprus, or you move your business to Cyprus, there are tax incentives and other incentives for your staff and your business to set up in Cyprus. Thank you for the attention. I know that there were questions that were posed during my presentations. I have not been able to go over my slides and read simultaneously the question. We will do it through the end. And I know that some of you already posted some questions during the registration. I will deal with them later on. I believe one or two of them have already been done by me and from my colleague Dimitris. So I leave the floor to the next presenters. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Alexandros. I'm sure we all firmly believe and agree that that was a very thorough and interesting presentation. So thank you very much for that. We will now hear from Herodotos. Thank you. Sorry, Herodotos, you need to unmute.
Now, yes, excellent.
Perfect.
Together we're going to take a very quick look at the registration procedure and what are the main requirements in order for a CASP to be registered with CySEC. Now, the requirements for registration are basically emanate from the three main legislations that were previously presented by Alexandros: the AML Law, the CySEC Directive on registrations, and the Directive on AML. Now, the registration procedure was perfectly, presented by CySEC through its policy statement. Now, the required information for the CASP registration are laid down via the application form uploaded on CySEC's website. And it is basically requested via 6 main areas. Now, we shall now take a quick look on the most important information and documents that are requested to submit a complete application. The CASP must provide some general information such as its name, trading name, and legal status, and submit full corporate documentation. They must also provide some contact details of its legal advisor and external auditor, if they intend to operate domestic branches or if they are established abroad, and of course to specify the services, activities, and crypto assets for which registration is required. Information must also be provided with respect to the initial capital. The initial capital depends, as Alexandros said previously, on the services and activities that the CASP shall apply for. CySEC wants to know whether private financial resources will be used for the initial capital or borrowed funds. Now, here it should be stated that CySEC pays particular attention on the origin of the funds to be used either for the initial capital or for the to financial support the applicant in an effort to examine any possible ML risks. Now, CySEC also wants to have a clear picture on the beneficiaries of the CASP and also be aware of the shareholder structure, and in case of a group, the detailed structure of the group up to the UBOs. The applicant must disclose further information and documents for all physical and legal persons that will hold a qualifying holding in the CASP, directly or indirectly. And this is basically done via the completion and submission of specific questionnaires that have already been uploaded on CySEC's website. It is very important to know that CySEC wants to know all closed links in an effort to verify whether this relationship will prevent the effective monitoring, evaluation, and supervision of CySEC onto the CASP. Now, CySEC will apply some key assessment criteria when evaluating the beneficiaries of the CASP. The beneficiaries must be in a position to demonstrate the ability to maintain a strong financial position of the CASP. In particular, they need to satisfy CySEC that the source of their wealth does not create any MLFT risks, are able to ensure the sound and prudent management of the CASP in the foreseeable future. This is usually 3 years, based on the financial projections in the business plan to be submitted with the application, and they fully disclose their net financial position, which shall be adequate to ensure the smooth operations of the CASP in the foreseeable future. CySEC also will assess the good reputation of the beneficiaries. This is done against 2 main factors, basically, the integrity and morality. Integrity will mean basically if the said person has been convicted or prosecuted, and morality takes into account their behavior in previous businesses and supervisory relations. CySEC expects for CASP to include policies and procedures within their documentation to ensure that the relevant persons remain fit and proper at all times. Now, the CASP must also provide information in relation to the persons that will manage the CASP. In particular, the CASP must provide a list of all persons holding a management position, including their job and time commitment. the board of directors of the CASP must be comprised of at least 4 members, 2 of which must direct the business activities of the CASP, and 2 must be independent members. For each of the persons that will manage, involved in the management of the CASP, must complete the relevant personal questionnaire. CySEC expects also from CASPs to confirm that they have performed due diligence with respect to the suitability of each person that would be involved in the management of the CASP, and also provide details of such an assessment. Also, they need to include a section, preferably in their business plan, on details on the induction and training of each person holding a management position. As in the case of beneficiaries, CySEC also follows some key assessment criteria when evaluating such persons. They must be in a position to demonstrate good reputation, knowledge, skills, and experience. Now, these terms are specifically defined in CySEC's directive for the registration of CASPs. Now, knowledge is substantiated by the existence of academic or professional degrees. Skills and experience is evaluated against 2 areas, the administrative competence and technical competence. Reputation is what we said in the previous slide. To this end, the CASP must also include a recruitment policy in their internal operational manual, which shall reflect the requirements in relation to what we just discussed. And CySEC expects for CASPs, as in the case of beneficiaries, to ensure that the relevant persons remain fit and proper at all times. These have been previously in Alexander's presentation have been presented. Now, CySEC expects for certain information to be submitted in relation to the operations and organization of the CASP. This is done via the submission of the following manuals and policies in which CySEC expects to check specific requirements. The first one is an organizational structure depicting clear reporting lines, an internal operational manual covering the following policies and procedures, some of which are the remuneration policies, client complaints, business continuity, conflicts of interest, security, and outsourcing. As previously said by my colleague Alexandros, in the case of systems and controls, CASPs are expected to commit basically to have the relevant certification in ISO 27000. They also need to have an AML manual in accordance with the AML law and CySEC directive, an AML SFT risk assessment manual with regards to the CASP planned crypto asset activities or services, including the risk mitigation procedures and policies, a compliance monitoring program, and a business plan, which will include, among others, the operating model and the forecast accounting plans for the next 3 years. CySEC will also request some additional information with respect to the operations of the CASP. These are, for example, the public addresses of crypto assets and or public keys in digital, the crypto, if the CASP will accept other CASPs as customers or not, if the CASP operates any ATMs, if it is registered or supervised in any other jurisdiction, and the CASP website. Now, in relation to the website, when operating online, a website fully owned and exclusively used by the CASP must be maintained without the possibility of any other person to operate through it, except, of course, in case where the applicant can show that it has in place the relevant policies and procedures to mitigate any operational risks. Now, in the case of applications, the applicants must disclose all the websites through which they will operate, and they have to provide evidence that they have full ownership of those websites. This must also be evidence in the IWEM of the CASP. Now, some other considerations for a successful acceptance evaluation of the application is that the documents must be in accordance with the CySEC policies, translated, notarized apostille. CySEC must always be informed of any change in the information submitted without delay. And as part of the evaluation process, CySEC may request additional information and documentation in order to properly review the application. Now, the time frames, CySEC, as per the directive, has must within 6 months upon submission of a complete application inform the applicant of its decision. There is a non-refundable fee of €10,000 for application to be accepted and evaluated, and there is a fee of €5,000. This is paid annually after the CASP has been successfully registered for the renewal of the CASP's registration. That's it from me. It was very quick, but I pointed out the main points of concern and the main points on which an applicant must pay attention for successful registration. Jonathan, back to you.
Many thanks, Herodotos. Theo, over to you now, please.
Mm-hmm. Well, good.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So I would like first to thank all the colleagues at S.Platis for inviting me today for this presentation. I'm gonna emphasize more on the technical stuff that Alexandros emphasized in his presentation. In particular, I'll try to give you in like 10-15 minutes what is the state of the art right now in terms of blockchain and what is the progress out there. So introductions about me have been made. I'm Managing Director of Elective Consulting. We focus on blockchain and DLTs, building products, advising, consulting, and bringing into life ideas that are blockchain related, and also artificial intelligence and data science. We're proud that we have worked with some very big organizations, very big universities and companies, and our expertise in the blockchain space lies in the business and technology consulting, blockchain cryptography, decentralized finance, tokenization, smart contracts development and audit, but also crypto exchange and setup, customization, and also custodian solutions. So what we experience today in the last 10 years is the evolution of money, starting from like bartering, then standardization of money through metal coins and paper money, and finally people invented the technology that can be used to design the first completely digital and secure token currency, which will be based on the blockchain technology for sure. Now, nobody can doubt it anymore. Big players, as you already know, they started diving deep into this. Most of them have been blaming the space for the last like 5 years. Now everybody is on board and they don't want to left behind from the evolution from now and on. As you see here, JP Morgan says blockchain is laying foundations for digital money. And we have countries that already started developing digital currencies like China, digital yen, RS coin in UK, and in many other countries. The first challenge with Bitcoin especially was that of adoption, which seems that it's also something that has been overcome. We have countries that started already using Bitcoin as a legal tender. So it seems that real use cases start to appear. And since I'm into this space from like 2009 up to 2015, following all the trends, it seems that the evolution is natural and the adoption is getting more natural and natural. From this graph here, you see how Bitcoin, like blockchain, grew from its inception until very recently, and we experienced this exponential growth, which we have seen with all technologies. So this is the same graph pretty much regarding web adoption back to 2000s, and when the technology follows these curves, it means that it became mainstream, and it's inevitable that it will be used for real use cases. Everything started from Bitcoin. Regarding blockchain, all of you know, I'm going to do a very short introduction because I would like you to understand the challenges regarding tracing transactions. So what was the driving force behind the inception? It was the need for people to somehow hedge against the traditional financial system and develop a pure peer-to-peer digital currency with no intermediaries to oversee the transactions, and we only trust the code. Everything is democratically encoded and governed through code into the system. So we have this guy here, Satoshi Nakamoto, that started the revolution back to 2008 by introducing the Bitcoin to the world, and people realized that the accounting ledger behind this Bitcoin protocol named blockchain can be used for pretty much transforming and disrupting the whole economy and the whole financial sector. So how blockchain works, how transactions works, how tokens work. The idea is that it's a peer-to-peer software. You have your tokens that are proven to be owned by you through something called your secret key. There is a public key that is being used through the network in order to identify you and send you funds or receive funds. So if you would like to make a transaction, it means that you unlock your wallet through your secret key. You type the address that you would like to send the fund, the amount of fund. You click OK. Then there is a protocol that handles propagation through the network called the Gossip protocol. Based on this, the other nodes of the network that run the blockchain, they validate. And then we have like a cryptographic sealing method where we glue all the data together from historic data to present data linked in a way such that nobody can forge the transactions. Okay, I'm gonna skip all the cryptographic techniques, not needed, quite old cryptography, but what I would like you to understand here, it's a peer-to-peer system where you claim that you own something through something that it's called the secret key, and there is a public identifier for identifying who you are, not from an identity perspective, but just from a bit of strings perspective, and identify others that you would like to send this amount of funds. Each token, each cryptocurrency, it comes with a ledger behind it, which is called the blockchain, and the blockchain records pretty much all the transactions. It records, let's say, every 10 minutes, a block that contains all the transactions that happen in like previous 20 minutes, 10 minutes or something. So there is a GUI, there is a UI that you can go and query this blockchain. For example, for Bitcoin blockchain, there is something called blockexplorer.com, which you can use to go online, and you can inspect all the transactions, going back even to the Genesis block. Okay, this is good actually, because everything is transparent, everything is there, everything has been validated by the whole group. And as you see here, the space grows exponential, the number of nodes are growing exponential, the network statistics become healthier and healthier, and more transparency into the system, which means that what you see here, it's the state of the truth actually about the transactions that happen. So if I go into this blockexplorer.com, for example, I can type my address, my wallet address, and I can trace all my transactions, because the way these dashboards work is that they show you all the transactions involved within this wallet, which means transactions that have been received to this wallet and transactions that have been sent from this wallet to another wallet. And you can trace all the funds in a pseudo-anonymous way, in a sense that if you go to any type of open source explorers, you can start checking and see where the funds moved, and you can trace the funds, which is very good. It's like transparency. Okay. However, if you would like to do further forensics on this, it's quite limited, because as you know, everything is represented through big hexadecimal strings, no identity link. You don't know. So all the financial advisors will say that this is like an AML issue. It's quite problematic, which seems to be a challenge actually to have 100% information of what is happening on a graph of transactions, on a network of transactions. But nowadays there are tools like chain analysis, CoinFirm, and other tools that you can find online that collect data from these open source dashboards like Block Explorer that I've said before, and also they collect information from exchanges, crypto exchanges, and other legal entities that facilitate transactions, and they connect this information together to identify potential frauds or suspicions. But without getting the data from this legal entity, what it remains, it's a graph of like transactions which go from one address to another address, and there is no identity link. Okay, so the next evolution of transaction forensics tool is that of chain analysis and coin firm that Alexandros has already mentioned. And what they can actually tell you, you can give us input, let's say a wallet, that is a suspicious wallet or something, and then it will go onto the blockchain. It will check all the transactions that have been spent from this wallet or received this wallet and trace the other wallets also that have been involved with transactions with this wallet and give you a graph. And if it happened that, for example, an exchange reported that a wallet is suspicious or is proven to be related with fraud or something, then it tries through graph analysis, as you see here, to see if there is a possibility of a fraud in your case and give risk indicators regarding potential transactions. Okay, so it's very logical that the regulator will ask every CASP to pretty much maintain a tool like this, either build it in-house or find it from a vendor that provides such a tool. However, things are too good to be true. You cannot really chase anything here because, as you know, the blockchain and the whole idea of Bitcoin started with the idea of privacy and anonymity. We have evolution of new type of tokens that have enhanced privacy preserving features, which means it's quite impossible to trace whatever you do. Examples like these are Monero, Dash, which provide anonymity and privacy at very different levels, from transactional inputs, like it hides pretty much who sent what to whom. Everything is masked, but everything verifiable at the same moment. And this is guaranteed through some very advanced and complex cryptographic techniques out of the scope of today. But what I would like you to understand is that nowadays privacy technologies are very, very robust, and there are possibilities of having tokens that are fully non-traceable. And in case of this, I don't know what regulators will try to do, possibly nothing. I mean, you cannot do anything because the technology now exists and it's very robust. And as I've already mentioned, such tokens, such cryptocurrencies, they can be very transparent. They can offer verifiable data in terms of transactions, but at the same time, they can hide everything: origin level, sender level, transactional level, and pretty much anything related to transaction. It sounds quite magical. It is not. It's based on like sound mathematics and on technology called zero knowledge proofs. Okay. Other services online that can increase the privacy and anonymity transaction is something called Mixer. There were some mixers that went down because the regulators enforced this to happen. The idea of a mixer, it's like a wallet sitting somewhere, let's say on the ecosystem, and they receive input transactions with instructions where these transactions should be received. And by mixing all these transactions together, you cannot really identify if something went from A to B, because there is something in the middle and the input and outputs are so many, so that you cannot really conclude and do these nice graphs as we've seen before. Okay, but initially there were some legal entities offering this mixing technology. Many of them have been taken down by regulators, but it's good to know that this can happen in a decentralized way now. It can be automated. So again, this will be like a challenge for people that would like to do forensics on the transactions, because this is something that now can be done through smart contracts, and it's very hard to trace and stop. Actually, it's impossible to stop. Fully anonymous tokens, that of like Monero, Verge, Komodo, Zencash, Zcash. If you go online, everything based on zero knowledge proofs, you can find lots of privacy coins. Everything is let's say encrypted, everything it's hidden. You cannot do lots of forensics there. And this is a big challenge and headache for the governments and for the regulators at the end. Other applications of this blockchain technology and tokens, great potential for the financial sector. Payments, pretty much disrupted. All of you know it so far. What's gonna come next? Formal financial services activities like securitization, using blockchain for providing liquidity to illiquid assets like, let's say, real estate. There are many good protocols out there like Polymath and Polymesh being used in order to offer securities through the blockchain space, and also other big players in the financial sector like BitGo and other companies. In general, this evolution is quite inevitable. What we started now experiencing is transition from Web 2.0 applications, the apps, as you know, let's say Google Chrome, Google Drive, Skype, and so on. And everything is now built on top of a blockchain ecosystem. And we are moving to Web 3.0 apps. So the next generation of digital assets that will come will be, let's say, tokens or equities belonging to decentralized applications of what you've seen being successful so far. For example, for Google Chrome, we have Brave, Google Docs, and Drive. We have IPFS, and so on. I mean, this evolution continues, and this is the next wave of applications we've started seeing and will become much more mature in the near future. Also, with blockchain, you can do the tokenization stuff. You can tokenize pretty much anything that you want if you do it in the right way. Let's say collectibles, fine arts, antiques, even a software. You can sell equity from your company, debt, whatever you can think of, real estate, for example. Because this blockchain gives something called like the fractional ownership, which is it's very useful in order to liquidate illiquid assets. Other important thing about tokenization, we have actually four types of tokens. And digital assets, the digital asset might be payment token, like let's say Bitcoin might be considered as a payment token. Utility token, if you would like to build a new system and you would like to give early access, let's say, or provide some access to special features, you can design utility tokens. Security tokens, something that you have to go through regulation, definitely. And combinations of these like hybrid tokens. And this classification is something that appeared very recently in the crypto bill that has been published under the Ministry of Finance. And this classification stuff is what is very important in combination with these new exchange and cryptocurrency related, let's say, consultation papers, regulation coming out of the regulators. What you can do through this, if, for example, all these tokens are recognized as digital assets, legal assets, then you can run token offerings, as Alexander has already mentioned, which is similar to IPOs, the non-common IPOs, but running in a reverse direction, where you pre-sell some tokens regarding early access to your system or access to specific features, depending on how you would like to actually sell these tokens related to your product. Also, the evolution of ICOs is called security token offering. If you are gonna, let's say, tokenize your debt or tokenize your equity for a product or for your company or a part of a company or something, then you have to go through the STO process. Technology-wise, the same idea, but regulatory-wise, in STO, you have to follow specific steps so that you make sure that everything are conducted in the proper way under the required regulation. Security concerns, very, very, very important, because we are talking about digital assets. Everything is digital. I mean, we are living in a digital world. We are pretty much exposed 24/7 to external attacks unless we are aware about these attacks, and we try hard to, let's say, improve our security skills and improve, let's say, the parameter that protects our assets, digital assets. You see examples here, lots of money, for example, in big digital assets related projects. Here it's an example from Compound, that a leak that was found into like the vulnerable contract led to loss of 20 millions. So you have to be very, very careful about your digital assets. Another attack here, we have a cryptocurrency exchange that has been hacked, 90 million being lost. And the idea here is that if something is lost, it's pretty much lost forever. The only case that you can do something is if it's, let's say, an early project, digital assets corresponding to an early project, you can go back and reverse the clock, start again from zero and redistribute everything. But if it's a long-standing project and there is a hack, then you can't do anything, just forget your assets. So you have to be very, very careful. And the whole idea here is to find ways to protect your wallet. And what does this mean? Let's be more concrete. Protecting your wallet, protecting your fund pretty much means protect just the private key that is being used in order to access wallets that can communicate with the blockchain and make the transfer. So it's all about protecting a piece of information, okay? And there are many ways to do this, through online wallets and offline wallets. Online wallets are solutions that consist of outsourcing your wallet to online storage space, for example. While offline ones, the more secure ones than the online ones, are the ones that are known as cold storage. Cold storage means that I have, let's say, the key into hardware, let's say called nano ledger or Trezor. Then this hardware is offline from the system, which means that even if my laptop is being hacked, there is no access to this piece of secret key that can be used to unlock the funds. And cold storage is the recommended way for individuals level protection fund of the funds. So types of wallets, hardware, as you see here, paper wallet, traditional one, desktop wallets, mobile wallets, and web wallets. And for safeguarding your personal funds, the most recommended one is using hardware wallets, cold storage type of protection like Nano Ledger and Trezor. But it's good to go and do some reviews online to understand how these wallets work. We have extensions of wallets like this called multi-signature wallets. What does this mean? It means that if I have, let's say, 100,000 into my account, I don't want to just access this through one key, or maybe I have these funds with another person. Then you can build something called multi-signature, where instead of having, let's say, in simple words, one Trezor or one hardware wallet, you can make it such that two people need to connect their pieces in order to unlock the fund. And definitely this makes the system more secure because we remove single point of failure. An attacker needs to try to attack all the targets and become successful in order to steal the funds. And in this way, we harden even more the perimeter of our digital assets. If you are planning to be involved in the exchange business, the most recommended solution is to go through exchange custody, use a third party, for example, in order to protect your assets. You see examples here, Bitco, Coinbase offers this, Zappo, or whatever. And these companies, usually what they do, you sign a contract with them. They have a very high security standards in their company, and they're responsible for safeguarding your keys, your private keys. And they are responsible for helping you carrying out the daily transactions required in a way that you will agree. But the whole idea is that you don't have any responsibility on safeguarding the assets because everything is offloaded to an experienced third-party custody. Or you can build the custody yourself if you have, let's say, good security in your company. You can combine cold storage approaches with new technology approaches called warm storage in order to build your own custody. But you have to be very professional in this. It's easy targets for people that are not aware about how to set up custody solutions regarding safeguarding their funds. So this is something that it's good not to take very lightly. You have to take it very, very seriously. Crypto exchanges now, crypto exchange is the medium that facilitates peer-to-peer transaction through the order book and through bid-ask spreads for the transaction. And usually a company that provides exchanges, they have a software, which is usually a white label solution that is being used in order to facilitate transactions and connected for liquidity to other liquidity providers. And again, in this scenario, it's very, very, very important to safeguard the assets, safeguard all the connections regarding communication with external wallets, internal wallets, and whatever. And crypto exchanges nowadays, it's a huge business. Fortunately, we have some of them in Cyprus already. Malta managed to get most of them and the important ones. Here you see different types of crypto trading ecosystem. And there is evolution of this. Now we don't just have exchanges, we have also lending providers and many other that used to be traditional financial services activities. They are all mapped into the blockchain space. You see here some very interesting graph about trading revenue. So it's a very profitable business if you manage to become successful and keep up with the technological trends and offering new features, because the people that are going to trade cryptos are more sophisticated and maybe more demanding. And we have this centralized way of exchanging assets, which is evolving through fully decentralized exchange. The difference between centralized exchanges, this is what we want to regulate now. This is what the regulation is about now. But we have evolution through decentralized exchanges, which means that instead of just having a legal entity that runs the exchange software and facilitate transactions by getting like a commission for the matching, now we have smart contracts that it's a piece of software that can be encoded and facilitate these peer-to-peer transactions in a way such that no legal entity will be needed in the middle. And this will be another challenge for the regulator in the future. Okay, so thanks a lot. I know that I tried to cover a lot of stuff. I tried to give you like a history about the evolution so far and where things are going through full decentralization. Thank you.
Theo, thank you very much for that presentation there. So this now concludes the formal presentation section of this webinar. We've had quite a few questions come in, and I've seen that Alexandros has answered quite a few of them on the Q&A part there, so you can go and read the answers that have already been written. But for some of the ones that have not already been addressed, so we've also had a couple of questions sent in when people registered. One of the questions is it obligatory to operate a custodian in the EU? What exchange venue jurisdictions of cryptocurrencies are forbidden in Cyprus? Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Johnny. I will take this. No, it's not forbidden to use a hot wallet, let's say, in the EU. As regards what exchange venue jurisdiction of crypto are forbidden in Cyprus, are you probably referring to whether you are allowed to work with a decentralized exchange or jurisdiction, or work with an exchange based in specific jurisdictions? There are no restrictions, obviously. I mean, with which counterparties you can work with and from where, as long as you do this legitimately, and in your risk assessment, when you carry out your risk assessment of doing business with an exchange, let's say based in China, what are the risks of doing business with them? If there are risks that could possibly affect significantly your fiduciary duties towards clients to store their crypto assets, then it's, you may want to consider alternative safer options. So there are no restrictions, but you are obliged always, to act in the best interest of clients and make sure your business runs continuously and uninterrupted. So your choice needs to consider these kind of things, including the AML risk if you deal with exchanges from high risk level jurisdictions or decentralized exchanges and so forth. So I think that will answer the questions. The question in case the person who posed the question wants more information, happy to, you can type in further questions and happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Alexandros. Excuse me. Another question here. Will an investment company be able to invest in crypto assets through any exchanges, decentralized and centralized?
Yeah, it's preferable not to use decentralized exchanges given the peer-to-peer nature and increased AML risk, but there is no explicit forbidden to do so. Yeah.
Fantastic. Looking at some more questions now. Can you please give more information about lending cryptos companies?
I think I'll leave this to Theo.
This is for me. What kind of info is required? I mean, traditional lending companies that exist in the financial world, they are being mapped on the blockchain space. So I can provide liquidity through giving my Bitcoins, for example. This company can use them for some activity, generate some revenues, use them for lending. it's a traditional financial services business. You can search online and you can find many companies that do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Theo. We've had a question specifically for Alexandros come in. For existing businesses that have an existing crypto asset activity, the need to submit before the end of the month, you said, does this apply to everyone? This particular firm said they received an email from CySEC to submit their exit plan by the end of the year or to apply for a license, but did not specify a deadline.
Okay, thank you, Dimitra, for the question. Let me, before answering specifically your question, because we received many questions in relation to whether Cyprus investment firms can offer crypto asset services. Now, the answer is that CySEC prefers that to silo investment firms from this activity. Okay, so they prefer that in Cyprus investment firms do not offer crypto asset services. Of course, I'm not talking about derivatives on cryptos like futures on Bitcoin or CFDs on Bitcoin. I'm talking purely on crypto assets which are not financial instruments. Now, so the short answer and this is no. CIFs are not allowed to offer. There is a small window open given by CySEC for very exceptional cases in case there are no other options. Let's say the case that an investment firm deals on a Bitcoin futures with that is listed on CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and is involved in the delivery of the underlying, the actual crypto asset to the customer. So in that sense, you know, they will permit the registration of the CIF to carry out this activity, given that is integrated as part of the existing business of the CIF in the investments and connected to the investment services they provide. But I mean, in the majority of cases, the answer is no. They prefer to silo, and they express this view in their policy statement. Now, as regards to Dimitra's question, there are 6 Cyprus investment firms which were permitted by CySEC. They requested permission in few years ago from CySEC to carry out crypto asset services under their CIF license as an unregulated service, but under their CIF license. Now, those, according to CySEC and in their policy statements, those firms need to move out their existing business into a new entity, and which they need to apply to CySEC. Now, whether they need to apply by the end of October, according to paragraph 2.3.2 of their policy statement, these firms need to formulate and submit to CySEC by the end of 2021 an action plan phasing out their crypto asset activities until the end of 2022. I'm not sure whether the October deadline applies to them in relation to the application they need to submit, but for sure they need to submit a plan by the end of the year, how they plan to phase this activity out and apply in the meantime. I would say the October deadline does not apply to them, but they will need to definitely submit an answer to CySEC by when they intend to apply and what is their plan to phase out this activity. So I hope I answered Dimitra's question.
Thank you very much,
I think, okay, there was one from Katerina, which I think I did not answer, relates to.
I think it was asked twice. I believe the first time you answered it, it was submitted under.
No, I didn't answer that, Johnny. I think I didn't answer that. I left it intentionally unanswered because Katerina posted 2 times, one anonymous and one with a name, and I just okay. I will answer Katerina's question now. So because I wanted to answer this verbally, I think it's a good question. Thank you, Katerina. So the question is whether an AIFM license for investment advisory or portfolio management under MiFID will also be considered a CASP and will have to receive authorization to trade on behalf of its clients into cryptos. Okay, so we said that portfolio management and advice on cryptos is part of the scope of a CASP, right? So strictly speaking, you are not allowed to provide as an AIFM portfolio management and investment advice services relating to cryptos. And you need to seek a separate authorization and from CySEC under a separate entity for that. Now, whether a fund though can hold crypto assets for I believe that it can without a CASP authorization, since I did not see in the activity, we do not see in the activity of crypto assets, the CASP activity that falls into scope, fund management in relation to crypto assets, because so I presume that the answer is that a fund in Cyprus would be able to hold crypto assets without a CASP authorization. But it may be a good idea to confirm this with CySEC to be sure. I'm not sure. I haven't seen this being addressed in their policy statement or elsewhere. But in relation to whether an AIFM which provides investment advice portfolio management services on crypto asset, the answer I think is clear here. You will need separate authorization to do that, given that this will fall under provision of financial services in relation to crypto assets. So I hope that this answers Katerina's question. And by that, okay, I can see more questions coming in.
Thank you very much. We've had a couple more come in. There's a few more still to go through. So, is it expected that local banks will open accounts for CASP?
Yeah, I think this was answered by Dimitris during his opening speech. At the moment, yeah, this is a challenge. This is local banks, as far as I know, they do not deal at the moment with crypto asset. Firms that deal with crypto asset, they avoid this type of business and they label it as high risk. But you don't need to use local banks for it. You can use banks elsewhere that are more crypto friendly.
Thank you. Given CySEC is proceeding with the licensing and regulatory framework being incorporated to accommodate the shift from fiat to crypto and blockchain tech in general, has the CBC been consulted with, and are there any shifts in the Cyprus banking position to crypto and blockchain tech?
Yeah, I think the banks, the CBC, I don't think they can impose a mandatory requirement for banks to accept crypto business. Yes, there may be some, let's say, incentivize or induce the banks to do so, but it comes down to the risk appetite of each bank, whether they want to do business with crypto assets. The CBC has been very cautious until now with crypto assets, and I think that hasn't changed a lot. I think what is the situation is that they'll wait and see. Given that the crypto asset space now is being regulated more and more in Europe, and if there are more reputable EU banks dealing with crypto asset service providers and authorities dealing with this. I mean, countries which are well developed and big countries, big European countries dealing with it. Probably we will follow the same approach here, but in Cyprus, the authorities are quite cautious about it. Considering also, that this is still considered a very high risk industry. And also there was, other EU countries and regulators which have tried to be in the forefront of development in this space, may have not succeeded that much in doing so in terms of dealing with the risks arising in this activity. So everybody is a bit skeptical and kind of is on wait and see situation, I would say, especially in the banking sector at the moment.
Thank you. So for those who hold the position of CASP, like PM, IA, or RTO, etc., do they need to hold the basic or advanced certificate?
Yes, good question. I'm not sure there is a requirement for them to hold the advanced or the basic. For sure, the AML needs to hold the AML certification of CySEC, definitely. The AMLCO, definitely. Now, because the PM and investment advice and RTO and the advanced certificate stems from the investment services law requirements. And this is a separate legal requirement, not connected to the investment services law. So I don't think there is such a requirement, but we could confirm this with CySEC.
Thank you. Can a CASP transfer exchanged cryptos to fiat to a client's account in a CIF? Do you know if CySEC allows this?
Where is that question?
In the chat function. So if you click on chat at the bottom,
yeah.
It's about halfway up, posted at 1:45.
1:45.
Oh, 3:45. I will send it to you here.
Can a CASP transfer exchanged cryptos to fiat to a client's account in a CIF? Now, okay, so the question is whether a CIF could accept cryptos as a deposit in their account. I mean, there is no restrictions per se. On this, the CIF will have to do its own, KYC and due diligence of those funds and the source and origin of the client, and apply the relevant AML measures.
Thank you. Going back to the Q&A section, will there be any appropriateness assessment for the clients who will get access to the products and services of a CASP? So, for instance, retail, as defined by MiFID II, will they be able to access the products?
Yeah, currently no, but with MiCA, the markets in crypto assets directive of the EU, there will be probably such assessment done for clients.
Thank you. Would issuers of their own token need to apply for registration as a CASP, even though the only token they'll be issuing is their own?
Yes, the answer is yes, unless you are using a CASP provider. So if you are involved in the sale and distribution of your own issue, then obviously you need to become a CASP. If you are using another CASP that helps with the underwriting of the ICO, is the one that sells those cryptos, etc., then maybe not, most likely not. But somebody needs to do KYC of the client that will purchase these tokens. Now, it's either the issuer of those tokens if there is no other CASP involved, or if there is other CASP involved in the process of the sale of those tokens, then this CASP will have the responsibility of the KYC of the client, and the issuer itself will not need to be a CASP itself.
Thank you. Are NFTs considered as crypto assets?
I think I answered this question. That was another, I don't know if it's the same pencil that answered that.
No, it was asked a second time.
Yes, I consider it fits the definition. Unless the NFT, it's obviously a financial instrument. I mean, if it's a representation of a share, let's say, then probably it's a financial instrument. So yeah, tokenization, NFTs are crypto assets, yeah. I mean, I consider they are, yes.
Can a CASP be listed on an NEA exchange?
Where is that question?
Again, in the chat function, underneath the question on the NFTs.
Can a CASP be listed on a NEA exchange? I'm not sure what's a NEA exchange actually.
It's actually been asked twice, yeah. What we can do is we can take a note.
Theo, are you aware of what?
Yeah, if it's maybe it's a type of exchange, I don't know.
Well, what we can do is we can take a note if you ask that question and respond separately outside of this.
I think it's about the national exchange, right? This is what they are asking.
If it's and can a CASP be registered in?
Yeah, Cyprus.
The rules of the exchange permit so. The Cyprus Stock Exchange. CASP is a legal entity. Will be a legal entity under the corporate law in Cyprus. So I presume that will be legally possible unless the Cyprus Stock Exchange will not permit, we're not talking about the products, the crypto assets that the CASP deals with. We're talking about the legal entity that forms the CASP itself. So probably yes, but obviously this is a question that needs to be answered by the Cyprus Stock Exchange. Legally, assuming this is a limited company, public limited company formed under the corporate law, they would be able to get listed, assuming they also submit their prospectus to CySEC and it's approved, and they meet all the conditions of the Cyprus Stock Exchange.
Thank you very much. Now, it looks like that's all the questions we've had so far. So thank you everyone who joined us on today's webinar. Dimitris, Alexandros, Herodotos, and Theo, thank you very much for your time today. This session has been recorded and we'll be notifying everyone as soon as it's been uploaded and is available to watch. If you would like to discuss getting further assistance with anything covered on this webinar, can you please email info@mapsplatis.com. I've also pasted this email address into the chat function of this webinar, so you can copy and paste it if you wanted to as well. Again, to all the attendees and the panelists today, thank you and have a very good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.